As an accountant, you are privy to a ton of client data. And this data is a goldmine of valuable information. What we're talking about this week, how to generate automated reporting with that data. This is probably the shortest path to building a fully automated service offering within your firm. The technical term is image generation APIs. We're basically learning how to make an API call to generate a dynamic image with data you've pulled from an accounting system or anywhere else. This is something I've implemented in my firm, and it's super valuable. Can charge a bunch of money for it. The best part of all that, it's totally passive. Don't have to do a thing. Now this is the 5th in an 8-week series where I did this stuff live with my accountant community. We're releasing it for free on YouTube now, so you can get continuing education credits for it. Check out the video description below for more details. If you want to keep in the loop on this sort of stuff, be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter at subscribe.jason.cpa. So without further ado, let's make some money while we sleep. You'll see some developer talk on Bannerbear because it's a tool for developers, but fundamentally it's a very simple tool. So you create a template, a design template, you feed it data, and it uses that data to update the words or the numbers or images that are in that template. So here's a very basic example, image generation demo. You have a background image you can pick, I think it's like a foreground, like a profile picture sort of thing, and then text that you want to be on top of the image. So we can generate this. So here it's using the Barcelona background. We've selected this lady's profile picture and it's put this text on top of the image. And so you can mix and match this to be whatever you want. And the API itself takes the data that you give it and then hands back a polished image that you can use. So fundamentally, it's as simple as that. And you're able to generate these images at a cost of less than a penny per image. So are there valuable ways that we can leverage this? Basically, are there any applications where we can arbitrage the cost of generating an image versus the value of what somebody will pay for it? A few more examples just to keep the gears turning. So back in week 1, we went through a couple of other examples of things I've done. Here was an automated kind of thing that went out for everybody in tax Twitter at the tax deadline. Here's a scorecarding concept that I've talked about quite a bit. That's very simple. So this in itself is a template, and the variables are the person's name, the date, this number, that number, and that number, and then probably number of stars. So you've got 6 or 7 variables here, and you can automate this, the generation of this image from beginning to end. So somebody supplies the data. Each person has a preferred delivery method, be that SMS, email, Slack, whatever it is. And whether that's a person getting this once a month or 100 people getting this every day, you're able to automate the generation of that yourself. And it's requires no manual work to generate. And it's up to you to determine how do you bill for something like that that could be really valuable to your client. A couple other examples. I think you see a lot of stuff like this kind of design around podcasts, stuff like that. And this is really just a template with my face and the words change. But, if you do a monthly blog post or a weekly blog post or something like that, and in your newsletter, maybe it's helpful to have a visual like this to reference out to that blog post. I think there's a lot of applications for stuff like this. All sorts of things like commission calculations, things that are done on an ongoing basis that may be difficult to understand that you could create a visual for. These can be full page size format even. So you could do your own kind of bespoke tax return summary or a breakdown of somebody's QBI or something like that. Inside of Realize, we could create a template that posted something every time a new member joined or something like those, little visual of them and the profile image they used and welcoming them, that sort of thing. In my own firm, I'm being very careful about how we roll this out because we're spinning a lot of plates right now, but we've got a couple of beta clients that we've done this stuff with. And here's an example of a weekly scorecard we're issuing for one of our clients. And how we've approached it is we've actually taken it a step further, and we've designed almost like components to a scorecard. So you'll notice down here, as section 2 and section 3 are the same. that's like a component of a larger design. So what we're doing is we're designing kind of some reusable components that could be built into a scorecard of any kind. And maybe 20 of those go out in a single scorecard, or maybe 20 of those go out to 20 different people every day or every week. This is a dental clinic, but this is like a week, this year's week compared to last year's, year to date. This is more like a data table format, and it dynamically will color based on the previous week's results. And then here's just a real basic heads up kind of side by side. So we're tiptoeing into introducing this to our clients and are beta testing it with a few of them. And so far it's going well. We're just being cautious with how we approach this because we think it's a pretty cool opportunity. Okay, let's build something.
What do you have that hooked into? Is that directly connected into QBO, or is that connected into an Airtable?
So in this case, this is production data that comes out of their practice management system. And so they have an admin on their team, and one of their admin's Monday morning tasks is to complete this like 8-question form and plug 8 numbers into this. And then the scorecard gets sent to them automatically. So most of this data is actually past period data. So like she has to provide this current number, current AR aging. I think there ended up being like 8 to 10 actual new numbers on this report that she enters via a form, and then the scorecard gets sent to them automatically. So we've got like an email reminder that goes out to her automatically to make sure she submits that. And for a low volume entry, something like that works totally fine. You can have an admin person do it, and we're able to charge, I think we're charging like $500 or $600 a month for this right now. But to jump ahead a bit, because you asked about it, you also have tools you can use for larger volume entry. Flat File is a service where you can embed a button or link to the service from your tool. So you can link out to that from an email or however you're going to request that information from the client. And then you define the upload format. So similar to how you may upload like a chart of accounts to an accounting software, and you've got account number, account name, all those things, you define what all those headings should be. And you probably make it to, align with whatever the output is in their system. And then they can upload that data to this system on a recurring basis. If it's a larger volume of data, let's say you're running scorecards for 40 employees a day or something like that. A few different ways you can capture the information, but the beauty of it is it's a closed loop that's totally managed by the client. They're just paying you for the product. So from end to end, they put the data in, they get the scorecard back, and you're not doing anything in the middle. Let's make something super basic. So projects, I'm gonna hop into scorecard here. Inside of Banner Bear, you have projects, and then under a project, you can have any number of templates. So you could have 10 templates that belong to a project. Maybe your project is a scorecarding framework like I showed here, and you have 5 templates underneath that are different designs. That's kind of Banner Bear's vernacular, I guess. So we're going to create a template from scratch. Banner Bear has loads of templates to get you started. I know we're all accountants, so designing something cool looking isn't going to be our strong point, but you could also hire somebody on Fiverr to throw together a simple design for you, that sort of thing. In this case, we're just going to build a couple of things from scratch. Okay, so we're creating a new template. And what I want to make is like a hello, my name is name tag sort of thing. So that's probably about the dimensions that we want. So we've got a new template here called template 3, and I'm going to say edit template. Hello, my name is, okay, we're looking for something like this. Okay, so we're inside of Banner Bear. We're designing a template from scratch. It's fundamentally very simple. You're just going to add layers, and those layers can be images, they can be text, they can be shapes. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to make the red bar that goes on the top of the bottom just to kind of lay out that visual design. Let's see. So big old bar on the top and then a skinny bar on the bottom. I'm going to click this layer and duplicate it. Pull that down here. Now we're going to add a text layer for that static text that's just going to be there for all of these name tags. You can change these, different fonts, different font weights, all those kind of things you would expect there. How are we doing here? All caps, my name is. For example, let's say we're running an event in Miro and you want to have an icebreaker where everybody has a name tag or a game piece or something like that. You could ahead of time, based on the registration list, put images into Miro for each of those participants. So everybody has that kind of handle for themselves in there. Okay, so we've designed the static elements of this, and really the only dynamic element is just going to be this text field where your name goes. So I'm going to put my own name in here just to help me lay it out and get the sizing right. I want that to be real big. But I'm going to rename this layer to something helpful. So let's just call this name. And then when we generate these images, the only layer we're going to modify is just the name layer. Everything else is going to stay the same. Now, one thing I'm going to do here for this name layer specifically, there's a auto text fit option here. I'm going to turn that on. And what that does is, based on kind of the boundaries we define here, it's going to auto resize your text to ensure that the name stays within that text box. So if your name is Bartholomew, it's probably going to have to be a smaller font size than this. So I'm going to rename this template to hello, my name is, and then save the template. How do we generate these suckers? You got a few options. It actually Bannerbear actually has a direct integration with Airtable. So if it's like a limited run, like one-off sort of thing that you're going to generate them for, the direct Airtable integration might make sense. Effectively, how it works is you connect it to an Airtable base, and then you define all the variables. So your field name in Airtable is going to be named the same as your layer name in Bannerbear, and then it will push the data that's in that field over, and you hit like import inside of Bannerbear, and then it pushes all those images over to Airtable. So I've seen some cool sort of things where people will create like playing cards for their team members or something like that. So like I've got a member base in Airtable for all the members inside of Realize, and maybe we wanted to make these kind of funny like playing cards for everybody. The direct Airtable integration may make sense there because all your data is already there and you just hit import once. It's not going to be the kind of thing that you're like wanting to automatically do all of the time. So Airtable is one option in terms of how to get data in here. I'm going to show you forms because it's actually got a built-in form builder that's very basic. And then we'll look at Zapier, which is what you're going to use for like large volume ongoing things, I think. So for the hello, my name is template, we can now create a new form. And so this is just a simple Bannerbear hosted form. So we're going to edit this form now. So the name of the form is create your name tag. Put a subtitle in there if you want. And then what layers do you actually want to ask about? All I actually want to ask about is the name layer. Enter your name below. So let's look at this form. So this is the form that we just built. All that there is it just requests a name. So I'm going to say Jane, create image. And then this page is actually going to hand that image straight back. So if this is client facing, if you had a really basic use case, they could just hop in here, bookmark that form link, and then the image would be generated for them and they could download it themselves. So that's the basic built-in form builder approach. Here's what I normally do. And I think this makes more sense for like a automated service that's client facing. So what I actually use is Airtable for collecting data. I'm going to create a new Airtable base. And then whenever a new record is submitted to Airtable, I trigger an image generation in Zapier. So let's create something a little bit more interesting here. I'm going to create another template. And maybe all this template does is a very basic, like current period compared to prior period numeric comparison. So it could be any sort of KPI like sales, something like that. So let's create a text box here that's just going to be a label. It's just going to say current period. And we're going to put that over on the left-hand side. I'm going to duplicate this to be the prior period to add a label for that as well. Why don't we also have a number that is the change between periods? Okay, so these are the labels that will go over the numbers that we're presenting. So now we need to create the text fields for the numbers that we actually want to supply to Bannerbear. So I'm going to put a placeholder in here just for visualizing what this is going to look like. I'm going to make this a little bigger because this is the focal point of the visual itself. I'm going to set the boundaries for how big I'll allow the number to be and then turn on the auto text fit. And then I'm just going to duplicate this 2 more times to put in the change and prior period spaces. Okay, so now when we go to generate an image, we want these layer names to be something that we're actually going to recognize because we need to know how to wire up the data that we're pushing in to these specific text boxes. So I'm going to rename this to be current label. So I'm saying label to make that clear that it's really just the label that's on that text, not the actual number that I want to fiddle with. Change this to change label. And then these are the numbers that we're actually going to push in. So I'm going to say current, change, and prior. In reality, what you would probably do here is you would have some sort of image that was your background here. I'm going to drag this to the bottom so it shows up behind everything else. You would probably create some sort of cool visual here. And you know that this scorecard, for perspective, how this scorecard works is there's an image that's the background of the template that just doesn't have the name, doesn't have the date, doesn't have the numbers, but it has all the labels. And all that Bannerbear is doing is there's 6 or 7 text fields on top of that fancy looking background. So this thing's going to be ugly. In reality, what you're going to do is have something more like this where it's got a kind of cool design background. And what Bannerbear is doing is just putting the parts of it that change on top of that fancy looking background. And the result is something like really cool that looks like it was done from scratch, right? Okay, so I'm going to delete this background. This will just be super simple. So let's call this simple scorecard. We're going to save the template. And then we're going to build an Airtable form for collecting the data that goes into this design. So first we need the current figure. And I'm just going to make this an integer. We need somebody to provide the prior figure. And then the change we can calculate ourselves. So I'm going to make this a formula type field. And we're going to do, which way would it go? The current minus the prior probably. So that's going to calculate automatically. And then maybe we just name the records by the date or something like that. Maybe they do them once a week or once a day or something like that. So we'll make that a date type field. So we're going to build a simple form for this. Say generate your scorecard. Call this scorecard date, current amount, prior amount. If you're actually using this in production, you probably actually wouldn't even ask for the prior amount because you already have that, right? You got it the previous week, the previous day. So in this case, you'd actually really just need the current amount. You could maybe even just use the current day instead, but keep things simple. So I'm going to open this form and let's push some data into the base. So let's say we're generating that scorecard for today. Current amount is 120, prior amount is 100. I'm going to hit submit. Thank you for submitting. Now, we've got a record in our base here. And what we're going to do then is we're going to set up a Zapier trigger to trigger every single time that a record is added inside of Airtable. So let's make a new Zap. This is initiate scorecard generation. Our trigger is Airtable. The trigger event is anytime there's a new record. So each time a new record hits that base, it's going to start this entire process. Already got my Airtable account connected. I'm going to select that scorecard base that we just started. And then there's just one table in there, table 1. So test trigger, and it should grab that one record that we already put in there. Yep, current 120, prior 100, change of 20. So now what do we want to do with that? We want to hand it off to Bannerbear. Bannerbear hasn't actually made the image yet. So we need to plug that data into Bannerbear. So we're going to say create an image. We're in the step 2 now. So step 1 was the Airtable trigger. Step 2 is creating the image in Bannerbear. Got my Bannerbear account connected already. Now we have to select which template we're generating it from. So you can see, hello, my name is down here, but what we want is simple scorecard. Now, what it's going to populate with is all of the labels that were inside of that design. So for the current label, which we don't actually want to push anything into, right? That's just static. You can change the text. You can change whether the text is going to auto fit. You can change the label color, the label background. So for example, if this was the current number, maybe if the number went up, we would want the color of that number to be green. So in that case, we could push in not only the number, but change the color of the number. In our case, we don't want to mess with the labels. So we're going to leave all those blank. Current is that current number. So I'm going to click this. And here we can see the data that it pulled in from Airtable. I'm going to say show all options. And what we want is that current number of 120. I don't want to mess with any other aspects of that number. I just want it to update the text. So I'll leave those blank. The change number will be the change of 20 coming through from Airtable. And then the prior number is the prior of 100. That should be it. So I'm going to say continue. And then let's give this a test. So what this did is it told Bannerbear create the image, but we're not actually doing anything with that image yet. Now, if I go to Bannerbear, I can see all of the images that have been generated. I think what I need to do is refresh this page. Okay, so now we have an image that's been generated down here. Before there weren't any images generated, but less than a minute ago, Zapier pushed this test image in. Let's take a look at it. And we've got the current period number, the change, and the prior period. Looking pretty impressive. So Zapier pushed that image to Bannerbear, but we're not actually doing anything with it yet, right? Let's turn on that Zap. What this Zap does is it tells Bannerbear to generate images. That's it. Now what we're going to do is create a second Zap where the trigger for that Zap is an image generation is complete. So we're going to make a Zap, and the trigger is going to be Bannerbear rather than Airtable. So I'm going to say Bannerbear. Trigger event is there's a new image. So in the previous example, it generated that image. When the image generation was done, because these can take, depending on how big they are, they can take up to like 40 seconds. When that was done, it would then trigger this action. So here is where you define what you do with the image itself. Where it goes could even be defined in that Airtable base, or could be dependent upon the recipient, that sort of thing. I'll just email it to myself. But yeah, the power here is because we're sending it via Zapier, you can send it anywhere that Zapier can connect to. And so you have services inside of Zapier like SMS by Zapier. So you could use Zapier to text message that to somebody. You can obviously use it with your email client. You can connect it to Slack or Microsoft Teams. You could push it into your project management system. I don't know why I do that, but
You've got the full power of what Zapier will do to allow you to deliver that visual to wherever makes sense. And in the client-facing context, I think this is valuable because every client's going to be different. Like I work with a lot of dentists. The dental assistants don't have emails because they're not sitting at a computer all day. They're actually working and doing stuff. And so a lot of times they'll have a Slack or something like that, and everybody has Slack on their phone. For them, it would make more sense to push it out via Slack. Or maybe the clinics that don't use Slack, we just want to push that out via SMS. So maybe at the middle of each day for all those people, they're going to get an update of how that day is going or how they're doing month to date. And that comes to them via their phone, and they've got a simple image that everybody can see as a check-in throughout the week, throughout the month, that sort of thing. So you've got ultimate flexibility depending on the type of client that you have as to where you send it. So in this case, I'm just going to email it to myself. So I'm going to put my own email in here just to make sure that this works. But again, this can be defined from any set of data that you have. So if you're onboarding a client, you would probably be pulling this to data point from somewhere else. So subject, here's your image. I think you have to have a body, so I'll say body. And then we're going to attach. Here are the data points coming over from Bannerbear. We're going to use the image URL. So it's not the image itself, but it's the URL where that image now lives. I'm going to put that in here, and you'll see there's a note here from Gmail. A file to be attached can be an actual file or a public URL, which will be downloaded and attached. So what this step is doing is it's going out to this URL where the image lives, it's downloading it, and it's attaching it to the email. So let's try sending that and make sure that works. So here's your image, and the image is attached. That's that. It's interesting when you start thinking bigger picture about what is the full loop of like the full cycle of this look like. How do you onboard a client? How do they submit data on an ongoing basis? I think client onboarding is going to lean into this existing kind of setup that you have in Airtable. So there's probably a form they complete, maybe even a form they complete for each recipient. And so that when Zapier pings Bannerbear to generate those images and then gets triggered when the image generation is complete, all the data that you need to send out all of those things, the preferred delivery method, that sort of thing, is already defined in your Airtable base. So you set that up during onboarding with the client, and then each time it runs, you've got all the data here to know where to send it automatically. So that's the general idea. So you could use Airtable for capturing probably smaller amounts of data, but then that flat file tool that we looked at is a way to do CSV uploads. If you have a system with a larger amount of data that you want to process on an ongoing basis, all an admin person on their team needs to do is just grab that export file, hand it off to the system, and you can generate as many images as you want. That aspect of it, not that hard to set up. The hard part is, where's the opportunity? What's this look like, right? This is the only thing between you right now and $1 million product is how do you present that data in a way that's valuable to your clients? That's like really the power of this. And that's why I wanted to orient this around, let's just throw together some ideas, because how you use it is more interesting to me than how it actually works, because that's fairly straightforward. So let's see what we got so far. KPI comparisons. I like that. Somebody want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so comparing sales from one month to another or 1 week to another.
Yeah, I think a downfall of the way most people do KPIs currently is that's probably on a monthly cycle, and you've got a list of 10 to 12 KPIs, and then you're meeting with oftentimes a single person that's taking responsibility for all those KPIs. But if one of those KPIs is something like sales, in all likelihood, there can oftentimes be 20 stakeholders above that sales KPI that impacted that result. Those could be salespeople, could be your marketing team. There's all sorts of things happening upstream. Yet at the end of the day, the owner is the one taking a result for that single KPI, as opposed to building more automated reporting above that single KPI that goes out to all those stakeholders on an ongoing basis. shortening that feedback loop to where if the client met with you on the 10th of the month about the previous month, does he then go back and have those conversations with those stakeholders 25 days later? Or are you better off having ongoing reporting to each of those stakeholders at a higher volume throughout the month? Wouldn't make sense to do manually. That's a lot of freaking work. But if you can set that up in an automated way, then everybody's getting reporting on that KPI throughout the period. I like it from a standpoint of breaking out those KPIs usually. So rather than a single list of 10 to 12 KPIs, like what's happening upstream of every single one of those KPIs and how to kind of delegate ownership of those different KPIs rather than it all going to a single person. Debt retirement. Sandy, what are you thinking there?
I have a client who is more interested in how quickly he's paying down his debt than he is his profit. So I'm thinking tying it to an amortization table and then having some way to check and make sure the payment was made so that so it ties out. I'm just thinking it would be an easy way to automate that and get that to him every month in a cool looking way.
Totally. You could have like a beginning and ending debt and even like an extra principal line, or you could totally do something like that. I like that. Tax liability based on state. Oh, that's Sandy too. What are you thinking there?
Fed and state. So I'm thinking that, every quarter, or as we approach those estimated tax payment deadlines, we are evaluating that for our clients and making a recommendation. So I'm thinking of a way to automate that ties into QBO and helps run those numbers instead of it being an entirely manual process for every stinking client.
Yeah. That's cool. I've been thinking about something similar because how my tax planning works is people are either on tax planning 1 or tax planning 2. Tax planning 1, we take one look at it in November and that's it and give a recommendation. Tax planning 2, we do a deep dive both in November and then in summer. But how can I give them interim reporting between those deep dives that tells them if we're getting off track from what we planned or not? What I was thinking was, like, we do a deep dive planner. And from that standpoint, we set, and I think the common way to visualize it is like a line graph and then a dotted line for where we think we're going to go the rest of the year. And then when we do that deep dive, maybe we set up like a marginal rate for any derivations from that projection. And then the next month we could automatically spin out an image. And if they're then $10,000 above where we thought, then we may say right now we're plus 3,000 on our projection or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that'd be really cool because it gives them more live information without having to like commit that couple of hours that it's always going to take to actually like doing the deep dive. Yeah, I thought about like, are there frameworks like Profit First or like EOS or that sort of thing where you like even build kind of the visuals that piggyback those concepts? But totally. Anything else? Client or cash flow? That's abstract. That was a guest. Whose is that one? But I want to know what you're thinking.
That was me. Right now we use Google Sheets to show clients their weekly cash flow. I was just thinking if there's something that could give them like a summary.
Yeah.
And then they could click further if they wanted more detail.
What does it show now? Is it like daily balance with expected bills to come out, that sort of thing?
Yeah, and expected sales and things like that.
Yeah, I'm interested in this too because I think everybody has their own hacked together way of doing this, and we're definitely in that boat. I thought about maybe, because you can create multiple images that could then be like paginated in a PDF or something. I thought about maybe like a overview page in the beginning that's like daily expected balance, and then maybe have a page for each day that shows the detail. Because I guess you couldn't really drill down on an image, but maybe you have like supplemental images that are the backup for that kind of overview. This is something like that there absolutely is not a great solution for right now. So I've used like a lot of the cash planning tools are more long-term cash planners. And maybe I've got the worst clients, but most of my clients that want cash planning are worried about like the next week. And so like what the next month or two look like, they don't even care. So we're doing this very short-term cash planning. Dry Run has been good at that for us, but that sucker's like $80 a month per client. And that's been a lot to get my head around. But that I would actually be super curious to explore, Abby, because I've got the exact same problem right now. And I think we could set up something cool like that, and then everybody could leverage it. Like, we define what the onboarding looks like and the nuts and bolts in between. And I think that sort of thing, like, we could totally all lean into.
You get a big woohoo from me on that one.
Honestly, I think that's like the most exciting aspect of Realize, I think. Client scorecard. Luke, like how much you like them? Like this client was a C+ this year? Or?
Yeah, so we have a client scorecard in Power BI that hooks in and shows us all the data, but the thing that's missing is, do our people like working with them?
Yeah.
Can we upsell them more? And so creating a form for our people to utilize that then links back into the data so we have a more holistic picture would be awesome.
Yeah. What do you think you would do with that visual once it was created?
We fire clients and seriously, like we're in the process right now. If they score below a D, there's not a good reason or a good way to get them up, we get rid of them. And if they're in that B/C range, we figure out ways that we can potentially upsell them. And then if they're an A, we make sure we're getting in front of them at least once a year to make sure we're meeting their expectations.
So that's an exercise I actually really want to go through with my own clients, because it's something we haven't done before. But like building your client scorecard just to begin with, like how are you going to define the factors that dictate that score? And one of them has to be, are they total jerks to work with? But I think we could also spend an entire like roundtable session talking about how to fire clients. Yes. Adam has talked about how he makes all of his staff do it. I need to learn from him on that. Firing clients is totally the kind of thing you need to have a framework for. And here's what the communication should look like. And once you've got those guardrails, it's much less intimidating for other people to do, I'm sure. But like, how do you build those guardrails and coach people to be comfortable with that, right?
Yeah, I really like Adam's approach. We tried sending out a letter for the first time last year, and it was amazing. We had a lot of boomerangs that we sent out a letter telling them we fired them, and then come tax season, they begged and someone caved and they're back now.
That's hard. I think I'm going to rearrange the community because there's a lot of spaces there right now, and to make it a little more functional by type of tech and by process maybe. But image generation is one of those really cool things in our tool belt, I think. We have these common sets of problems. This is one of those ways that we could solve those problems, among others. You know, there's certain things that are still better done in a standardized email template. So you may send out that standardized email via Zapier, but there's some things better suited just for text-based communication. Whereas there's some things suited for images, like stuff that needs to go out omni-channel to a bunch of people, and maybe they want to get it via SMS. Images are super suited for SMS or just for presenting things in a standardized way. So it's one option. It doesn't mean it's always going to be the right answer, but definitely something to like keep in mind as we're thinking, what's the right solution for this or that for our existing problems. But in terms of, is there a new service we could do with a ton of upside? I'm probably most interested in image generation more so than anything else. And it's not just image generation, it's using API integrations and web forms and all that. If there's an opportunity for us to build a cool service that our clients would really appreciate and pay well for that could be totally automated, I think that lives in the image generation space. So keep noodling on this, because we could be here this time next year and maybe it's just a shared kind of scorecarding component framework with like 4 or 5 components like this. And maybe it's as simple as that, but we figure out how to streamline the onboarding so that anybody can plug into it. We could even have them processed out of a centralized account or something if that wasn't something that you wanted to manage yourself. But keep noodling on this, because if you have a unique application for your clients where this would provide a lot of value to them, I think this is a great example of something we could build together. The result would be a higher level, look, better experience, but it's something that we could potentially all leverage.
On what you're offering your client, did they come to you with a problem and you put that together? Or is that something where you saw an opportunity and walked them through what you thought a good KPI would be and did it that way?
So this is one of our larger, like more engaged clients where we're doing like CFO type work for them. They already have weekly check-ins where one of the people on my team puts together kind of these metrics in an Excel spreadsheet, but they're literally just numbers in a grid, stuff like AR aging, production week over week, that sort of thing. I put all this together into a visual and I sent it to them and I said, we're beta testing some new scorecarding reporting. Here's how this would work. Your admin would put like 10 numbers into a form and you would get this back immediately. You wouldn't have to wait on us for that scorecard at all. You could generate it yourself. Would you pay $500 a month for this? And they were jacked. They were like, absolutely. And not every client's going to be like that, but it was as simple as that. And that's not a long-term solution. That's like how to introduce it to a potential beta client type solution. But in their case, it was easier because we already had all the data to build this out. And so we could show them exactly what it looked like as opposed to something more abstract where we didn't have that data. But this is a dental clinic. I work with a bunch of dental clinics. I can put dummy data in this now. And if I want to, in my annual renewals or mid-year or something like that, I can send a promo out to a bunch of dental clinics and say, we can do this thing starting at X per month. And I think we would probably get some pretty good hits on that. I'm a little bit terrified of doing that. So we got to make sure we have the bandwidth for it. But in this case, it was easier because we already had the data, so we could put it right in front of them. But yeah, thinking about the sales side of that is interesting. I think the onboarding you can make pretty streamlined, and they literally self-onboard via a form. But how to approach the sales aspect of it, I'm not sure because I haven't done it yet, and I'm scared. It's good scared though. It's like I think a lot of people could dig this kind of scared, but I just want to make sure I've got the guardrails set up to make this manageable and also make it not a Jason thing. Like I have to have my team trained up on it too.
Yeah, true. So how much does the client come back to you on this and ask you questions about it? Or is it pretty hands off?
We already have a person that's advising with them on a weekly basis. This scorecard is the starting point for that advising rather than that spreadsheet they were putting together.
Got it.
So in that case, it's not like a replacement for the conversation, right? But that's definitely a thing to consider because if I offer this to a bunch of my clients, I'm not offering them advising. I do need to be really explicit about that. I'm not offering advising, I'm offering reporting. And so I guess it's worth being clear about this doesn't mean I'm going to come in and tell you why this number was different or advise on it on an ongoing basis, but this is also like big time opening the door to that conversation. I think especially like you do, if you're doing a deep dive with a client before you even start working with them and you understand their systems, like having that deep knowledge of what they do would make this a pretty easy sell. But
yeah, I think so.
So what are the use cases you're thinking of for micro reporting? I would love to hear about them in the video description below. Honestly, this is like a slam dunk for accountants, I think. If you have access to client data, there are so many helpful ways to present that data, and all of that value is up for grabs. This was the 5th of an 8-week series. We're releasing these week over week. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the boat. And if you need continuing education credits, check out the video description for how to get those.